Ex-teachers professors of Reddit, what was your frick this moment? A female student I had disciplinary issues with accused me of hitting on her and making obscene gestures towards her. I'm an openly gay man and most of the staff knew this, yet the district still put me on suspension while they investigated. They were able to prove she was lying, but the district decided that the best course of action was to transfer me to another school instead of, punishing the student. I quit at the end of the school year and got a job in banking. Dang, that is fricked up. A student had a mental breakdown in the library, smashed a wooden chair, and gouged a pencil in his arm while screaming that he wanted us all to go away, and I got reamed out for not calling campus security before I called 911. Please skip this paragraph if you have issues with violent events. Frankly, I am glad I called 911 first, or this story would have a really bad ending. When the student gouged his arm, he must have hit something and blood started pulsing out of his arm. He, inflated, I don't know how else to explain it, turned purple, and screamed even louder. He took a step toward a student, looked at his arm again, fainted, smashed his face into a table corner, and started convulsing. The 911 dispatcher talked us through what we needed to do until the EMTs got there. The student survived. No one else was physically hurt. He sent a thank you card after he got out of the treatment program. On calling security first, I was never informed of that policy. None of the other staff faculty who were trying to get the other students out or hidden in a staff room knew about the policy either. Others called 911 also. The person who screamed at me for not following the chain of command was the person who was supposed to train all faculty and staff in the policy. They did not do that. The school did have a history of not reporting vandalism, car break-ins, and thefts to local law enforcement. I don't think that came into play with this event. I still second guess myself about the events, but sometimes you can only do the best with what is in front of you. I know you got reamed out, but thank you for calling 911 and not campus security. Most will not do anything. You probably saved that kid. I had a student that copied off another kid during a test. I gave him a 0%. The parents came in to complain to administration that, since I hadn't explicitly said during the first day orientation that cheating wasn't allowed, it was an unfair punishment. Administration forced me to allow him an opportunity to retake the test. He never retook the test, and the grade of 0 stood. Still, I was so disillusioned by the entire experience that I started looking the next day at college programs that I could use to transition away from public education. Proof that some that go into administration are wholly unfit, like it has to be explained that cheating is bad. 2 weeks into my first year teaching 9th grade math, I had a girl attack another girl for no reason in my class. She was grabbing onto her hair really tightly and I was trying to break it up. Another student tried to help me out and somehow the instigating student managed to punch him in the face and give him a bloody nose while still holding onto the other student's hair. Now what makes this story relevant is I literally said the words "frick this" while trying to break up the fight. Not loud, not to a student, but just like "frick this, I am not gonna let this happen in my class right now." Well, the instigating student decided to tell the principal that I was cursing at her, despite the other students in the class supporting me and the fact that this student had a history of violence. I got a letter in my permanent file saying I had used inappropriate language towards a student. Frick that. Teaching taught me a lot, but I couldn't do it for more than a couple years. Really respect those that make it their career. Schools alike. Kids fighting for no reason. No fricks given. Teacher whispers a cuss word while trying to stop that fight. WTFFF. How fricking dare you frick your career. When the principal told me one of my students' mother was getting her secondary education certification so she could move up to teach HS math, where her son was, so they wouldn't be renewing my contract to teach the following year, but they were in need of a network administrator for the school district, and they were willing to pay me a teacher's $25,000 salary to do it, and I would be answering to each building principal, like a janitor, not to the superintendent, like a district level admin. So they moved you from teaching kids to teaching servers. Going through my frick this moment right now. Been in special education since 2007. District I work in desperately wants teachers to start new classrooms due to overcrowding, yet they don't want to hire the right people. They'd rather hire fellow locals from high school in the area who the admins know versus hiring qualified people from the outside. Our special education admin has zero spec ed experience and his replacement also has no spec ed experience. Not fun at all. The principal's niece made a B in my freshman geography class and she wanted me to bump it to an A because the child could not get into Texas A&M with a B in a freshman class on her record. This school also pressured teachers to fail no students. End of year assessing students to see who'd progress through to the second year. While assessing the work, the department head came in and said we had to fail X amount due to facilities and resources for the next year. He then returned an hour later and said that due to the budget we actually needed to pass a higher number than originally thought. I completely ignored what he'd said and carried on marking on merit, but it was the proverbial straw. This was a UK university a few years ago. The system has been really messed up in recent years. When admin wouldn't let me take more than 4 days off after a close friend died unexpectedly. "You're letting the kids down" is a phrase I heard over and over again as I tried to reason with them. My girlfriend died. "You're letting the kids down." I'm in the hospital. "You're letting the kids down." I have terminal cancer and am bedridden. "You're letting the kids down." Looks at your gravestone. "You're letting the kids down." I failed a college student who never came to class and missed both the midterm and final exams. The influential parents complained to the school. The administration later went into the digital records and changed the fail to a passing grade without my knowledge. I found it out later, third hand. Ergo, I refused to sign a second year contract they offered to me. That kind of thing can cause a school to lose its accreditation if reported. Caught a student cheating. But, stupid cheating. Cheated off of someone else with the wrong answers and the same wrong spelling. When I spoke to him regarding taking a new test, generous on my part considering it should have been a 0 per school policy, he refused and said I would be hearing from his parents. I, of course, did hear from them via my principal within an hour. Gotta love kids and their phones readily available. Fast forward to a meeting with the student, parents, and principal. I had his test and the one from which he cheated. Upon showing this to the parents, I fully expected them to understand and hold their son accountable. Nope. Instead, the parents demanded an apology from me for branding their son a cheater, which would negatively impact him for the rest of his life. And also, it's the least I could do since they were paying my salary. When I said I would not apologize for catching their son cheating, the father then said I was lucky I was a woman because otherwise he would punch me in the face. Nice. So, yeah, good times. Glad I got my master's degree for that. I think. Can't remember, this was over 10 years ago now. The student was taken out of my class. Everyone wins new admin these days. Super supportive of everyone. Holds teachers, parents, students, custodians, cafeteria workers and everyone in between responsible. Parents still get a little crazy, but as a staff, we feel very much supported. Also, for the record, I do love my job. Comes with its insane stories like they all do, right? Give me what I want or I will physically harm you. And the pattern continues with their son. When the prestigious high school I was working at focused on sports more than academics. On top of that, it turned out that the principal overrode teachers' marks if they tried giving students a failing grade. Frick that. I was teaching middle school English while overseas in Europe when two students, a boy and a girl, began viciously fighting after the boy made comments about the girl's mother. For most people, this would be easy to break up, but as a 5 feet 5 inches manlet, both the 13-year-old kids had several inches and pounds on me. When I positioned myself in between them, they took a break from fighting each other to work as a team to push me over a desk. They then promptly resumed punching each other's lights out. I quit that week. In case anyone is interested, the fight ended abruptly when the girl gave the boy a nosebleed and he finally let go of her ponytail. When I positioned myself in between them, they took a break from fighting each other to work as a team to push me over a desk. At least you got them to work together instead of against each other for a second. That's an all-around crap situation though. My mom retired as a special education teacher after a student bit her hard enough to draw blood. She had to get a ton of tests for everything from hepatitis to freaking rabies. She was fine, thankfully, but that was when she decided that she'd had enough. She went on to sub for non-special ed kids and eventually to do administrative work at a charity for ASD individuals. I feel for your mom. I worked at Target as one of their rent-a-cops and got bit by someone we were restraining. It broke the skin. They sent me to the doctors and had to get a litany of tests. It's not fun. Kid poured gasoline under the door of my room after hours and lit it, burning most of the room. The facility guys worked all weekend to clean it up and paint it, hauling in new desks to replace those burned. Not long after that, I found out I could make more money with less hassle by waiting tables at the beach. Plus the beach has women in bikinis. I was gone a week later. You haven't studied for the test tomorrow, do you? A. Pretend to be sick and stay home to study. B. Guess the answers on the test. C. Burn down the entire freaking classroom. Was substituting at a low-income middle school for the day. About 40 students per class. Just had a simple worksheet for them to work on every hour rotation. Spent the day breaking up fist fights, chairs or desks being thrown across the room, students having screaming matches, students climbing and dancing on desks, students just leaving class during the chaos. I had 6 students turn in the completed worksheet for an entire day of class rotations. I realized I was no longer a teacher but a prison guard with less benefits and no way to defend myself. I guarantee 80% of these kids will end up dead or in prison before the age of 25. Never again. Another one that resonated with me. Glad I'm out. So I was at A for a college course, Introduction to Information Assurance. One of the labs for the class involved performing a SQL injection. If you don't know what that means, just know that you have to build your input string carefully. The attack required a very specific input. Well, this one student was getting frustrated and asked for some help. After looking at his input string, I realized he had it just right, except he was missing a terminator on part of the input. Semicolons. Am I right? I pointed out the simple mistake and he didn't take it well. He smashed his own face on the keyboard, logged off the machine, thanked me, and left the class. I knew this level of teaching wasn't for me. I don't know what he's been up to, but I can't imagine a coworker responding to bugs like that. Forgetting a semicolon can do that to you. I was a high school teacher with 7 years experience in my district and a master's degree. I was making $49K. This was 2013. I was talking to a friend who was in from out of town. This friend had barely made it through his bachelor's degree, even with a lot of help from him and other friends. Over dinner he was complaining about not getting a good enough raise, so he was only making $143K at his software consulting job. He didn't do the technical stuff, more customer relations. I left teaching to make more money. I am, but it has taken a while, and I really miss working with the kids. Wish I had stayed in teaching. To be clear, I don't begrudge my friend a penny. Good for people who do well. During my student teaching, I was at parent-teacher conferences. I was speaking to a parent whose son was failing, mostly because he did none of his homework. She was angry with me and pretty much told me it was my fault. She asked me why I wasn't making sure he did his homework. I said, it is homework, meaning work you do at home. It is your responsibility to help him and make sure he does it. She complained about me to the teacher I was student teaching for. He warned me that teaching is very political and that parents can keep you from getting tenure or get you fired. Other teachers told me that this was the climate nowadays. Children are not held accountable and parents blame you for their lack of parenting skills. I decided that it was not worth it to finish the teaching program, so I finished early with a degree in history and policy. The subjects I would have taught, history and social studies, are X. My degree is pretty much useless, but I still make more than a teacher does. I dropped from the teaching program and went ahead with a history degree. Also, I just tell people I majored in Trivial Pursuit. I work and teach in higher ed. I still teach online and had a student a few semesters ago who did hardly any work but asked for an exemption from all the work she didn't do. I had to reply and confirm she was asking to get a passing grade for doing no work because either I was just reading it wrong. There's an amazing amount of student entitlement that I didn't see 10 years ago. Sort of like I pay for a passing grade in this course instead of I pay for access to college level content. I think all the really great free resources online have changed the way they look at learning and we haven't kept up. A bit off topic, but I've recently been spending time at my kid's elementary school setting him up with an IEP. Just working with the staff and watching how fast paced it is really surprised me. I'd be in a meeting and suddenly a walkie would go off and they'd have to go out and handle a student issue and then come back to me. And that switching gears process is non-stop. And this might just be because I live in a relatively small town, but it seems like every teacher and staff member knows every kid's name and really seems to care. After spending years working with doctors trying to help my kid, it's the people at his school who've dramatically changed his and our life in just a few months. I know I couldn't do the work they do and we will be forever indebted to them for their intervention. I told this story last year, so you may have heard it. I was subbing for a class that integrated some of the special education students for 2 hours a day. We were having a holiday party, so the kids got to push their desks together and have snacks and watch a movie. I'm sitting at the desk grading papers when I hear the class getting kind of noisy. I ask what's going on and someone mentions that Trevor doesn't like this part of the movie. Trevor is a 12-year-old boy on the autism spectrum. He's a very large boy, about 6'0" and well over 200 pounds. I tell Trevor to come on over to my desk and he does. He says he doesn't like when people sing in movies and starts covering his ears. I tell him I will fast forward this part and he flips his crap. Apparently, he hates fast forwarding more than he hates singing in movies. He picks up a desk and whips it against the wall near a set of windows. Flips over every desk he can get his hand on, all while screaming like someone is attacking him. He's just trashing the room and starts going after the kids. I yell for one of the kids to run and get his main teacher and another to get the principal. Trevor pushes a few kids hard enough to make them fall down and then grabs a girl by throat and starts choking her. He has a look on his face of a madman and he's sweating profusely and turning red while this girl is trying to fight him off. I get over there and am able to pry his hands off with the help of a few students. Trevor then turns to me and in a crazy, deep voice says, "I will find your house and hide under your bed until you come home. I will violate and murder you," and laugh while I'm doing it. His teacher came in and was able to pull him away and Trevor just stared at me the entire way out laughing like crazy. It was scary as frick. I was an adjunct, at the bottom of the totem pole, and got my class assignments last and only if the more senior people everyone had gotten their minimum number of classes. They'd hold off on this until the literal last minute, and I'd find out if I was teaching 3 days before the semester started. For the last 2 or 3 years, I was only teaching online and only in the summer. During that time I moved away and started a business, so it was all fine with me. The last summer, I got 2 classes I'd never taught before with about a month before they started. I had to learn a totally new subject for one, and remember stuff I hadn't looked at since grad school for the other. They almost took one class away from me after I'd busted my butt to prepare for it, because nobody else's classes were filling up. The other class had 6 people in it. I was told I could teach it prorated, for 6/11ths of the usual rate, and I refused. I didn't have time to learn that stuff, teach 2 classes, and keep my business going. I was told I could teach it prorated, for 6/11ths of the usual rate, and I refused. Even for adjuncting, this is a new level of shitbaggery. You don't teach less just because there are fewer students in the class. My wife is a teacher. She started in the UK public sector, but left after 8 years. After a few months break, she went into private education. There wasn't any one thing that led her to quit. It was working in a system that, over 8 years, saw 3 curriculum changes, 2 exam changes, and 3 changes to the inspection process. A system that demanded more and more from the staff while cutting funding and freezing pay, where she'd get to work at 7 AM and leave at 6 PM, do some work at home, and spend almost every Sunday marking or planning or both, just to keep afloat. A system that was constantly narrowing its scope and becoming ever more inflexible, to the detriment of the children she was teaching, where her choice was either to teach her students to pass the exam, but deprive them of useful mathematical knowledge and critical thinking skills, or to teach them these skills, but run the risk of them doing poorly in their exams. This would jeopardize not only those kids, but future pupils as well, because poor exam results would bring the school's rating down, leaving it open to being taken over by an academy chain, which would be even worse. It was a system that took an enthusiastic and excellent teacher, ground her down and stretched her so thin she basically had a breakdown and almost left teaching forever. I am the version of your wife who left teaching forever. Every single thing you've written. These are my exact reasons. I didn't make 8 years though. I didn't even finish my NQT. I've been making minimum wage ever since and I never regret it. My wife got contacted about applying for a job out of state. I encouraged her to do so. My thoughts were, I have a year and a half of teaching experience and a master's degree in teaching from an R1 research institution. This will be easy. It was not easy. I was told I could not teach in the subject that I was fully certified and held a degree in my current state, despite reading stories about shortages and emergency certifications in my field. But I could probably make it work in another field if I took 6-7 classes. I now work another job that I don't really like, though I can get those 6-7 classes for mostly free if I want them. The problem is starting over as a teacher, again, would be a decent sized pay cut, and trying to convince myself to deal with the overall low societal respect for teachers is tough when the whole process has just exacerbated my depression for 3 years. I have to. Early in my career, I had students who were plagiarizing lab reports. I turned them in, mostly because I felt I had to. The school made a huge freaking deal about cheating and had an academic honesty pledge statement students wrote on every test. One set of parents screamed at me over the phone. Next thing I know, I had a meeting with the vice principal who said they didn't want the cheating to interfere with the students' future, and he ripped up all the plagiarism reports I wrote that year. My second time saying frick this was based on the cumulative effects of being unsupported by the school. They changed which courses I was teaching, and the grade level. We had a construction project going on, so there was constant noise, including beeping and drilling, even when they promised it wouldn't be during the school day. That was a lie. Stupid school-wide initiatives, more pointless meetings, incompetent high-ups. It's the adults in the system that make it hard to be a teacher. The kids are generally not the problem. I left during the first month into spring semester at a poor rural high school. It was my first year teaching. Went from professional life to teaching through a state program. Absolutely no support from the administration. One class had over 30 students, another had half the class as troublemakers who would not calm down. Had a bomb threat, a gun found on a kid, a student death, and a teacher fired for an inappropriate relationship with a student all before Thanksgiving break. A quarter of the teaching staff was new. 2 people in my department had already left. Several teachers had already quit. And the interim principal and administration were refusing to help teachers with anything, and actually blamed us. I'm trying to hang on. I'm hating every day of my life, and I'm thinking that all I need to do is make it through 1 year and I can do something else. Then early February, the principal calls me in and tells me that he thinks that I'm not a good fit, and at the end of the year I will need to go to another school or I will be terminated. In the real world, you don't tell someone you're fired but stay on for a few more months and then expect them to stick around. I was out of there and thankful for it, although it hurt to abandon my fellow teachers and the students. Also, I had 1 teacher of the month during the fall semester, so I couldn't have been that bad. They had done this because I refused to fill out a slip of paper indicating if I would be staying on for next year. This was basically, verbatim, my second year teaching. I left in February and believed I was done with education. 2 years later I got a job teaching overseas and love it. Amazing how much admin impacts your life. Good riddance. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.